It's a little after midnight, and you're lying in the dark, awake, and quietly furious about it. You fell asleep at 10 with no trouble, and now here you are, staring at the ceiling, certain something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. For most of human history, waking in the middle of the night wasn't insomnia. It was the seam between two separate sleeps, the natural architecture of a night divided in half, and your body still remembers the design even though the world stopped honoring it 300 years ago. But knowing that doesn't fix the ceiling you're staring at right now, because the two-sleep pattern didn't just leave a gap in the middle. It left a specific hour, a specific hormone, and a specific state of mind that most people misread completely. And once you misread it, you turn the calmest part of your night into the most anxious. Get that hour wrong, and you'll spend the rest of your life fighting the one thing your nervous system was built to do. So let me walk you through the night, the way your body would run it if you let it. Not the 8-hour block you were sold, the older shape underneath it. Here's the thing almost nobody tells you. The idea that humans are supposed to sleep in one unbroken stretch is astonishingly new. A historian at Virginia Tech named Roger Ekirch spent close to 20 years reading through diaries, court records, medical texts, and prayer books from before the industrial era, and he found the same two words appearing again and again across languages. First sleep. Second sleep. Not as a complaint, as a routine. People went down around dusk, slept for 3 or 4 hours, woke naturally around midnight, stayed up for an hour or so, and then went back down until dawn. The gap had a name. The English called it the watch. The French called it dorveille, the space between sleeping and waking. What did they do in that hour? This is the part that surprised even the researchers. They didn't panic. They prayed. They talked quietly to whoever was beside them. They tended a fire. Some got up and visited neighbors. And yes, physicians of the time explicitly recommended it as the best hour for conception. The waking wasn't a defect. It was a room in the house of the night, and everyone knew where the door was. So what happened? Why don't you know any of this by instinct? Artificial light. Ekirch traced the disappearance of segmented sleep almost exactly to the spread of affordable lighting through the 17th and 18th centuries. First oil lamps in the cities, then gas, then Edison's bulb sealing it shut. Evening light pushed bedtime later and later. The night got compressed. The hour that used to sit comfortably between two sleeps got squeezed out of the schedule, and within a few generations, the memory of it was gone. By the 1920s, the phrase, first sleep, had vanished from ordinary speech entirely. Your great-great-grandparents knew a word for this that you were never taught. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is where health content usually oversells. You'll hear people claim segmented sleep is definitely the one true natural human pattern, and that 8 solid hours is a modern invention that's ruining you. I'd rather be straight with you. The historical record is genuinely strong. The diaries are real. The two-sleep vocabulary is well documented across centuries. But the claim that every human everywhere always slept this way is weaker than it gets repeated. Studies of some modern hunter-gatherer groups, like the Hadza in Tanzania and the San in Namibia, found they mostly sleep in one consolidated block, not two. So the honest picture is this: your body is capable of both. The divided night was extremely common in cool, dark, pre-industrial climates, and the seamless block was probably shaped as much by light and temperature as by biology. The design is real. It's just more flexible than the headline suggests. But there's a piece of hard biology sitting underneath all those old diaries, and this is where it stops being history and becomes something happening inside you tonight. In the early 1990s, a sleep researcher named Thomas Wehr, working at the National Institute of Mental Health, ran an experiment that I think about often. He took a group of healthy adults and did something we almost never experience anymore. He gave them long nights. 14 hours of darkness every night for a month. No screens, no lamps, nothing to do but lie in the dark the way a person in the year 1650 would have, once the sun went down in December. What happened to them? For the first few weeks, they slept off an enormous backlog of tiredness. But then, once that debt was paid, their sleep quietly reorganized itself. It split in two. They would fall asleep, sleep for around 4 hours, wake for 1 to 3 hours in the middle of the night, and then fall back into a second sleep of another 4 hours. Left in long darkness with nothing pulling on them, modern people, office workers, ordinary volunteers, spontaneously rebuilt the exact pattern in those old diaries. The design wasn't gone. It was just buried under electric light. And here's the detail from Wehr's study that matters most to you. The one I think is the whole reason to understand any of this. During that waking hour between the two sleeps, he measured what was happening in their blood. Their levels of prolactin, a hormone your body also releases during deep calm, during the drowsy contentment of rest, were markedly elevated. The people lying awake in the middle of the night weren't stressed. They were in a measurably distinct state, closer to quiet meditation than to anxious wakefulness. Their bodies were bathing them in a hormone of stillness. They described the state as peaceful, restful. Not a single one of them described it as a problem, because nobody had told them it was one. Now hold that against your own midnight. You wake at 1 in the morning, and what's the first thing that floods in? Not prolactin soft calm. It's the thought, I'm awake again. What's wrong with me? I have to be up at 6. I'm ruining tomorrow. And that thought is not harmless. Here's the mechanism, and it's the most important thing I'll tell you tonight. The moment you interpret the waking as a threat, you trigger the hypothalamic-pituitary-adrenal axis, the chain that runs from your brain down to your adrenal glands and releases cortisol, your primary alertness hormone. Cortisol is the exact chemical your body uses at dawn to wake you up and start the day. So by panicking about being awake, you order up a dose of the wake-up hormone in the middle of the night. You take a soft, prolactin-rich pause that your body designed to be gentle, and you flood it with the one signal guaranteed to make sleep impossible. The waking was never the problem. Your reaction to the waking is what turns a natural pause into 2 hours of hell. Let me give you a picture for this, because it's the kind of thing that only makes sense when you can see it. Imagine a night watchman doing his rounds through a large house. Every so often he pauses in a hallway, stands still, listens, confirms all is quiet, and moves on. That pause is normal. That pause is his job. Now imagine someone bursts into the hallway every time he stops and screams, "Why are you standing there? Something must be wrong." The watchman was fine. The screaming is what wrecks the night. Your midnight waking is the watchman's pause. Your anxious inner voice is the person screaming in the hallway. All the biology is on the watchman's side. The damage is entirely in the screaming. So why does the waking happen at that particular hour and not another? This is where a second body system comes in, one most people have never heard named. Across the night, your sleep isn't flat. It moves in cycles of roughly 90 minutes, each one climbing from deep slow-wave sleep, the heavy dreamless stage where your body does its physical repair, up toward REM sleep, the vivid dreaming stage, and back down. The deepest, most delta-rich sleep is loaded into the first half of the night. That's why your first sleep feels so total, so hard to wake from. But as the night goes on, the cycles shift. The deep stuff thins out, REM gets longer, and your sleep becomes lighter and more surfaceable toward the middle. The natural waking of segmented sleep sits right at that transition, after the deep repair is banked, and before the dream-heavy second half begins. Your body isn't waking you at random. It's waking you at the one hinge in the night where surfacing costs almost nothing. And there's a temperature system stacked on top of that. Your core body temperature runs on a circadian rhythm, drifting down through the evening, hitting its lowest point, its nadir, at roughly 4 to 5 in the morning, then climbing back toward waking. That temperature curve isn't smooth for everyone. For a lot of people, especially as the years go on, there's a small unsettled patch as the body works its way toward the coldest hour, and that patch lands you in light sleep right around midnight to 2. So the hour you keep waking at is the meeting point of 2 clocks, the 90-minute cycle lifting you toward the surface, and the temperature curve loosening its grip before the cold trough. 2 systems, 1 hinge, and you standing awake in the middle of it wondering what's wrong with you. If you've ever noticed that your worst wakings cluster in a narrow window, not scattered randomly across the night, but landing again and again around the same time, 1, maybe 2 in the morning, that is what you're feeling. That's not bad luck. That's the hinge. Here's a recognition beat I'd put money on. You've had the experience of waking in the small hours and having every worry in your life feel enormous, unsolvable, catastrophic, and then waking again at 7 and finding those same worries shrunk back down to ordinary size. You assumed the night thoughts were the true ones, and the morning relief was denial. It's the reverse. In that deep night window, your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain that handles perspective and proportion, is running at low power, while the amygdala, your threat detector, stays active. You are quite literally thinking with the brakes off and the alarm on. The 3 a.m. version of your problems is not the accurate one. It's the one your neurochemistry can't help but exaggerate. So if the waking is natural and the panic is the real enemy, what do you actually do at 1 in the morning when you're lying there wide-eyed? This is the part that will change your nights, and it's almost embarrassingly simple, which is exactly why people don't trust it. The first thing, and this is the one that does the most work, is that you stop treating the waking as a failure. When you surface in the middle of the night, the instruction is, name it correctly. This is the watch. This is the seam. My body has done this for 10,000 years. That single reframe stops the cortisol cascade before it starts, because cortisol here is triggered by threat interpretation, and you've just told your brain there is no threat. I know it sounds too soft to matter, but the entire mechanism that ruins your night is a threat response, and you are removing the threat. That's not a trick. That's the actual lever. If even that one idea is new to you, that the waking is a seam and not a symptom, hit the like button now. It's the only signal that tells the algorithm to show this to the next person who's been lying awake at 1 in the morning convinced they're broken. The second move is about light, and it's the most common mistake people make in that hour. If you wake and reach for your phone, you have just poured light into the one system most sensitive to it. Your retina contains cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, the light sensors that don't help you see at all. They only report the presence of light straight to your master clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your hypothalamus. Those cells are exquisitely tuned to the blue wavelengths in a screen. Show them phone light at 1 in the morning and they tell your master clock it's dawn, and your clock starts shutting down melatonin, the hormone of darkness that's supposed to carry you into your second sleep. So the rule is absolute. If you must have any light in that hour, make it dim and warm, the color of a candle, never the cold blue of a screen. The old diaries had this right by accident. They had firelight, and firelight has almost no blue in it. The third move is what to do with the wakefulness itself. And here I want you to do less than you think. You do not need to solve anything. If your mind is quiet, just rest in it. That prolactin soft state Wehr measured is genuinely restorative, and lying calmly in the dark is not wasted time. If your mind won't settle, get up, keep the lights low and warm, and do something undemanding and boring in another room. The pre-industrial version was tending a fire. Yours might be sitting in a chair with a paper book in dim light. The one thing you don't do is lie in bed straining to force sleep, because straining is arousal, and arousal is the opposite of what the second sleep needs. Sleep is a state you allow, never one you achieve. If understanding this just quietly rearranged something you've been getting wrong for years, and there's one more layer coming that changes how you should think about your whole night, not just the middle of it, subscribe now, because that part is a few minutes away, and it's the reason I put this together. Now let me deal with the harder question, the one that's probably forming as I talk. If the divided night is so natural, should you deliberately try to sleep in 2 halves? Should you throw out the idea of 8 solid hours and go back to first sleep and second sleep on purpose? My honest answer is no, and this is where I part ways with a lot of the people who talk about this. The segmented pattern emerged under conditions you don't live in: 14 hours of darkness, no artificial light, cool rooms, and no alarm clock demanding you be somewhere at 7. Depending on who you ask, this either means segmented sleep is our true nature, that modern life suppresses, or it means the divided night was simply what long dark winters produced, and consolidated sleep is equally natural in a lit, warm world. The truth sits between them. You are not going to recreate a 17th century winter night in a house with streetlights bleeding through the curtains and a workday waiting. Trying to force 2 sleeps into a modern schedule usually just gives you 2 short, anxious sleeps. So the point of knowing all this isn't to redesign your night. It's to stop fighting your night. The value is in what it does to the waking you already have. You will wake in the small hours. Most people do. And the likelihood climbs across the decades as your deep sleep naturally thins, and your sleep gets lighter and more surfaceable. That's not decline you need to fix. That's the deep sleep-heavy front of your night, doing its repair early, and then handing you over to lighter sleep, exactly as the architecture intends. The waking was always coming. What you get to choose is whether it's a peaceful watch or a panic. Here's the deeper layer I promised, and it reaches past the midnight hour into your whole relationship with rest. We have quietly built a standard of sleep that almost no human before 1800 would have recognized. 8 uninterrupted hours. achieved on command, in a single block, or else you've failed. Measured against a standard that's specific and that modern, of course people feel broken. You're being graded against a pattern that light bulbs and factory shifts invented barely 200 years ago, and then told your very old, very normal biology is a disorder. A huge amount of what gets diagnosed as middle-of-the-night insomnia isn't a broken sleep system at all. It's a normal sleep system being judged by an abnormal ruler, and then wrecked by the anxiety that judgment produces. I'm not telling you real insomnia doesn't exist. It absolutely does, and if you're getting genuinely too little sleep, exhausted every day, that's worth taking to a doctor, and I don't want anyone hearing me wave that away. But there's a whole category of tired, worried people whose only actual problem is that they wake once in the night, believe that waking is a catastrophe, and manufacture the catastrophe with their own cortisol. For them, the cure was never a pill or a gadget. It was a piece of history and a change of mind. Think about what that means for the arithmetic of your night. If you wake at 1 and lie there calm, drifting, maybe half dreaming until you slip back under, you've lost almost nothing. That quiet hour is nearly as restful as light sleep, and your second sleep still comes. If you wake at 1 and panic, you flood yourself with alertness hormone. You stay rigid and wired until 3, and then you finally crash into a second sleep so short and shallow you wake worse than if you'd never slept at all. Same waking, same hour, same body. The only variable that changed the entire outcome was the story you told yourself in the dark. That is an extraordinary amount of power to be holding and never knowing you held it. So here is what I'd leave you with as you turn this over tonight. Your body was built with a seam in the middle of the night, a hinge where the deep repair of the first sleep ends, and the lighter, dream-rich second sleep begins, a pause your ancestors named and used and never feared. The world got brighter and the seam got hidden, but it never closed. When you feel it tonight, when you surface around 1 and the room is dark and quiet, you don't have to reach for your phone or your worry or the certainty that something's wrong. You can lie there and recognize it for what it is. The watch, the oldest room in the house. Tell me in the comments, what time do you keep waking? Almost to the minute. I want to see whether yours lands in that same 1 to 2 window, because I suspect a lot of you cluster there, and I'd like to know if I'm right. And if there's someone in your life who lies awake at night convinced they've forgotten how to sleep, a partner, a parent, someone who says it tired every single morning, send this to them. It might be the thing that finally lets them stop fighting the dark. You were never broken in the small hours. You were just early, in a world that forgot the watch.